and welcome to another episode of Breaking the Guard. On today's podcast, I'm going to go over a few events that went over this past weekend, starting with the UFC. We had UFC 310. I previewed it on Friday, and I think for the most part, it lived up to the promise, which had a lot of entertaining fights mixed in the card. If I run from the bottom up, well, this is not in the order that I saw it at least. But you had Kennedy Nizujuku versus Lucas Bresky. Uh, it wasn't a it was a short affair. Kennedy won by a knockout. Clay Guida versus Chase Hooper. Again, Hooper got a submission there. That didn't surprise me. Michael Chiesa, Max Griffin, submission by Chiesa. Cody Durden versus Joshua Van. I didn't know either of these guys, but Van showed that he was a really sharp fighter. One of the ones here that I look, I'm like, man, why do they keep letting this guy fight? Is Chris Weidman. He fought with Eric Anders, and it was a weird fight. Chris is definitely not in his peak. He's 40 now. He looks really far past where he used to be. I mean, this guy used to be a killer. He had great striking, great wrestling. He had very good groundwork, and he's like a shell of the man that he used to be. And no offense to him, but it's just objectively true. Like, he just looks not good, right? And unfortunately, and from my eyes, at least over the past few performances he's been putting out, it's like he is not UFC level anymore. And I think he should just hang up the gloves and start working into something else, because it did not look good. Did not look good, and the stoppage, I would say, was pretty bad. There was 10 seconds left on the clock. He just got him taken down. I think Eric Anders hit him with it was two punches consecutively, and then they just jumped in to stop it. It just seemed like a weird time to stop the fight. Like, he had eaten a lot more punches consecutively that looked a lot more menacing, and they did nothing about it. So to wait until a 10-second mark to stop it when he just got hit twice is weird, But I don't think the result would have changed. If anything, it was an act of mercy in a way, but it's just sad to see someone go like that, If you're the coaches and stuff, you have to protect your fighter, and sometimes that means just telling him when to hang up the gloves, but that they keep pumping him up like he can make another return when the reality isn't there. He's taken some damage, with the legs, and just a lot of consecutive beatings, and not everybody wears it the same. You got guys like Yoel Romero that just never seem to slow down quite a bit, or at least not as much as others do. But in any case, that was unfortunate. You have Brian Battle versus Randy Brown. That was not a. It was an interesting matchup. I felt that going in, I thought Brown was gonna take it, just because I thought he was a little more athletic, had good striking tools, but I was wrong there. Battle really pushed the pace, and he used the fence to his advantage. He also missed weight by 4 pounds apparently, so he probably had some size as well. And he was able to just pressure Brown against the fence and beat him up. Not doing a whole lot of damage, but enough to win rounds. And he ended up taking that fight. This next fight, I feel, was probably the best fight of the undercard of the prelims, which was Movsar Evloev versus Aljamain Sterling. Very technical back and forth grappling match, right? And we all know Aljamain Sterling is a wizard on the mat, very good at taking the back and finishing. I didn't know much about Movsar other than he was 18-0, looks shredded. I figured he was going to be a good wrestler as well, and he was. Aljamain had the first round in the bag, got his back, I think in the middle of the first round, and was able to control for a good part, but wasn't able to secure any finishes. Mozart got some pretty good escapes too, and I think at one point he reversed into Aljamain's guard. In the second round, Mozart was able to turn the tables and take Aljamain's back and try to threaten chokes, but never really close. So they were taking turns, just grappling each other. I think Mozart won the second round. I would have to watch it again, but I know they both had uh, top time in that round. And then the third round, uh, again, they both had control time as well. So like a case could be made that Aljo won the fight, but at least from watching it, it felt like Mofsar won. He ended the round on top. I think he had the last half of the round. It left an impression, and it looked like he was building while Aljo was kind of fading a bit. And I was rooting for Aljo. But Mofsar is definitely a talent there. And I think it's going to be hard for other people in that division, because Aljo is very high level grappling. And he had his hands full with Mofsar. So I think everybody else in that division is going to definitely have a really hard time with that guy. So that's going to be someone to look out for. Vicente Luque versus Themba Gorimba kind of went how I thought it would. Vicente was able to rock Gorimba with, I think it was a hook or an uppercut, dropped him, and then went right into, I think it was an anaconda choke, finished him, actually slept him there. Yeah, Luque shows he's still as sharp as ever. Then there was Dominic Reyes versus Anthony Smith, and that went to Dominic Reyes. Then on the main card here, I put my picks out before, and I missed the first one. So if I was putting on a parlay, I would have screwed the parlay right away, which was Duhu Choi and Nate Landwehr. I thought, I'll be honest, I didn't really know much about either of these guys, and I kind of leaned on patriotism, going for America there since Nate was American. But within the first 30 seconds, I'm like, oh, I made a bad selection here. I've seen Nate fight before, and he's a lot better than he showed there. He really had nothing for him. I think Choi was just a lot faster than maybe anticipated, because Choi wasn't missing any punches, just like everything right through the guard, going around it, going under it. He was uppercuts, straight jabs, hooks, everything connected. And he was getting bullied on the fence. Choi would grapple with him, and he was able to move him around everywhere, but wasn't able to put him away, but completely dominated from start to finish. So that one went to Choi. Then there was Kron Gracie versus Bryce Mitchell. I thought Mitchell was going to take it, and he did. Kron, I don't know what he's going through, but it's not working for the fight game. He was pulling guard, but Mitchell allowed him to. Like, he clinched up with him, and then Kron would pull close guard and just play close guard. And in the first round, he did have a couple scary bites off a armbar, or maybe it was the second. I forget the rounds, but there were definitely some close moments there. Oh, it was the second round. So the first round, Mitchell won just by being on top and Kron accepting it. But nothing happened in that first round, really, besides just getting top position. Second round is where it got interesting. Kron was able to get a couple of the really good arm bars. The first one, threatening, but he never locked out the arm, but he was in a bad spot. And then I think Kron switched to a triangle, and then he eventually got out of it. On the second catch, towards the very end of the round, fully extended arm bar, kind of inverts a little bit, but Bryce was able to wiggle his way out of it. He probably popped his arm a few times for sure on that one. So he got close. So you would think after this round, okay, let's not let Gracie keep pulling guard. Third round, he allows him to pull guard again, but this time, rather than just jump in gently, because Gracie was jumping guard in midair, and then Bryce would kind of put him down. On this one, he put his forearm in front of the chin and then dove into it. And that definitely did some damage, because he was then able to posture up, throw a good right, and then followed up with one more elbow, and Gracie was out. So this is when pulling guard goes wrong, right? Like for, a lot of people are talking about self-defense. Pulling close guard with your opponent standing is not a self-defense move. It's the entire opposite of self-defense, right? This is not something you would do in a street fight for that very reason. That little slam right there with the elbow in front, devastating, right? Especially if your back of your head ricochets, which it did. On concrete, you're dead. Definitely out cold. Just bad technique in my opinion. That's a very sport move. I mean, you can get away with it sometimes, but not a good look. Good on Mitchell for getting that win. And winning on the ground, with Gracie, that's not an easy feat. Then there was Cyril Gane and Alexander Volkov. And interesting fight. Didn't go the way I thought it was going to go at all. I thought it was going to be more of a striking affair. But it was a lot more groundwork than anything. And I think Volkov was the first to look to score for a takedown, and then Cyril scored his takedown, and they were going back and forth on the ground, but it appeared to me that the first round might have went to Gane, second round to Volkov. Volkov was doing better on his feet he was landing more punches and connecting more kicks. Gane was landing some kicks, but they didn't look neither of them were really consequential. I think once or twice they both rocked each other, but I don't know, hard to say, right? It didn't look like, I think Volkov landing a spinning back fist at one point that got Gane's attention, but he looked like he recovered really fast. But the third round, Volkov took him down into a Kimura, and if Gane had the Kimura trap system in his head, he would have won that fight because he was in the Kimura lockdown, just almost there. Like he had the foot in the hip instead of threading the foot in, and had the Kimura really cinched in because Volkov could not pull off and had no real defense other than just staying there. But Gane didn't know how to finish it. He was just stuck. He didn't know how to sweep or to take the back or to roll into the armbar or go into a leg. There's a lot of stuff you can do there. He just didn't really know. Like he had like half the move and he forgot the finishing half. And then he switched to half butterfly Kimura, which great position to sweep from Sumigaesh, from either across towards the Kimura arm or overhead. Didn't also seem to know that either. So it's like, as a coach, I would have been like ripping my hair out. It was like so close. But the big mistake he made is that if he didn't know how to finish the move, he should have just released and gone into a different position. But the whole round was almost in that Kimura. And I think with like a minute or so left, he abandoned it and then tried to stand up, and Volkov just worked on keeping him down. So this is where it's interesting how you score this, because practically Volkov did zero damage. Like he was like punching his leg or whatnot, but it's like, whatever. Versus Gane's submission threat, which he was putting in for most of the round, and actively working to try to finish the fight. From the commentators like, oh, he lost the round because Volkov was on top the entire time. He scored a takedown. I'm like, okay, that's one. If we're scoring like a point system, I guess we would. But if we're scoring about aggressiveness and who's going to try to finish the fight, a case could be made that Gane was trying to finish the fight with a submission the entire time while Volkov kind of just stalled out. So there's that. But I definitely thought that based on MMA judging that Gane was going to lose the round, but he ended up winning. So interesting, right? I would have to watch the fight again, but that made me, 3 out of 5 so far. And then our next fight was Ian Gary versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. This fight was very strategic, and it looked like they were too reserved especially the first 2 rounds, a lot of nothing. There was a lot of outside measuring, and then Shavkat would just rush, get in a clinch, push him to the fence, and really work to try to get a upper body clinch and secure a takedown. Ian Gary showed that he has great defensive wrestling, because there were a few times that Shavkat was able to pull him off the fence and try to throw him and couldn't. There was a legit good throw. I think just about everybody else would have fallen. But Ian had some really great balance and hips, and he was able to stay up on his feet the entire time, did not give up the takedown, but definitely lost the rounds. So like the first 2 rounds he lost for sure. Going into the third round, now they kind of opened up a little bit. There was a bit more striking involved. If I remember correctly, I think at one point Gary was able to secure a takedown. I'm not sure. But I remember thinking Gary won that third round. It might have been a takedown or a reversal of some sort. But I had a 2-1 at that point from memory. Fourth round, this is where Shavkat realized that he could take down Gary with shots. Right? Instead of trying to clinch with him the entire time, he was able to shoot in, take him down. Gary was playing a very tight figure four close guard, which kind of made it very easy for Shavkat to win that round, because he was just doing ground and pound and landing some shots. Not big shots, but again, enough to win a round. And then it was like 3-1. Pretty much Gary needs a knockout or submission. Fifth round, Shavkat goes for another takedown. This time, Gary's able to take the back, body triangle, lock in a full rear naked choke, and start cranking. And it looked like it was over. And it would have been like a real Hail Mary there for Ian. But it looked like he didn't have the squeeze, right? And also, Shavkat's chin was down, and he didn't have the chin sideways. So he was taking it straight on the chin, which I think is better for not getting choked, but not great for your teeth. So I hope Shavkat's mouthpiece was really solid, because I'm sure those teeth were grinding, because he had a few bites on some good face cranks and rear naked choke attempts. But he was able to endure it, survive, and then eventually square off and get into Gary's figure four close guard, which he had kind of folded weird too, because the figure four leg was tucked under Shavkat's legs when he rolled in, which is almost like doing a calf slicer or a knee separation to yourself. But Gary didn't seem to mind it at all, which is interesting. And he managed to weather the rest of the round and ended up winning the fight by decision. But it definitely showed, I think it raised Gary's stock in my book, because he hadn't faced that level of opposition yet. And it was now clear to see, oh, he is actually on that level. He's very good, right? And I think it made Shavkat look a lot more human, because he had absolutely obliterated everybody else. But Ian, he kind of won a strategic match, wasn't able to blow him out, was never close to finishing him at all. So it's I think both of their careers are obviously gonna be headed towards the top, and I imagine at some point they probably might have to meet again, which might make for an interesting matchup. Well, it would make for an interesting matchup for sure. Hopefully, one with a little more fireworks, right? Like, they started opening up around the third round, but they kind of wasted the first 2 rounds in my book. Finally, main event, Alexander Pantoja with Kai Asakura. And this to me was interesting. A guy making his UFC debut. Again, not a beginner. He was a risen champion, but making your UFC debut for a title shot is a bold move. And the favorite. And I mean, I was just going with the the cannibal, and that's Alexander's nickname, because he's shown he's tough everywhere. You know, he can knock you out, he can submit you, he can do both at the same time, which is kind of how this fight went. Uh, they went with the first round, and he was just teeing off on Asakura, who was supposed to be the more dangerous striker. And he just pressured him really bad first round, rocked him a few times, and then going into the second round, more of the same, but this time he was able to get a takedown, go to the back, get a rear naked choke, finish it, remains the champ. Took some shots, I think deservedly so, Asakura, because Asakura was doing a lot of pre-fight antics, talking a lot of crap, and Pantoja returned the favor as a victor, which is the right time to talk shit, not before, but after. So he looks as dangerous as ever. I'm not sure who's going to be able to take him off his throne, because he is as tough as they come. So that was UFC 310. Like I said, good card. I got 4 out of 5 right. Not bad. If I stick to 4 fight parlays, I think I'll be okay. So that was that. We then had the UFC Fight Pass Invitational, which was actually a few days before. And that was a interesting card. I didn't get to see that one in person. I was actually in Wyoming. But I would say that there were definitely a few flaws in this one that weren't never really exposed as much as in this card now. And there were some good things I saw, and then there were some really like awful things I saw as well, right? So for one, the size of the combat area, way too small. I don't know, they shrunk it down. I mean, they've been out of bounds in that Fight Pass Invitational, for sure. But it seemed it was happening a lot this time around, to the point that it interrupted a lot of fights because there would be submission attempts that kept rolling out of bounds. So, you know, it wasn't really well thought out, in my opinion, right? Like, it's grappling. They need to make bigger spaces, right? They can't have these small combat areas. Like, it's get bigger room, right? If you're not going to do the cage or you know, or the slant walls, make a bigger room so that the out of bounds is not so prevalent, because there are a lot of out of bounds, and particularly as I'll mention, like some of the fights, people were escaping submissions by going out of bounds, but this time at least they were being penalized for it, which ended up costing them fights, right? There was the main event was Mikey Musumeci, right? He had a very lackluster fight, in my opinion. He kept getting into leg locks and really going hard for a straight ankle lock, right? For whatever reason, he was just fixated in trying to get this straight ankle lock. His opponent Felipe was just not having it, and he was just, you know, eating it. And he spent his whole regulation and the whole overtime just trying to score the same thing. In the overtime, he scored a takedown, or it might have been a reversal, and was able to win the match. But not great for fans. Not a fun watch, in my opinion. And then his post-fight commentary was also pretty terrible. So yeah, I thought it was an interesting choice for the UFC to put someone like Mikey as their first exclusive athlete, considering if you watch them on camera, he's not great on camera, right? I'm dogging on him a little bit on a performance that wasn't great for him, right? And that's why he was like hard on himself as well. And obviously, when he shines brilliantly. But I don't think he's really shined on the camera before, not like in interviews. I would think you would want someone like a Gordon Ryan or a Craig Jones, someone that's really good on camera, that can converse well and is a lot easier to market. Mikey is going to shine on the mats, not on the mic. So, I mean, that's my take anyways, right? So there was that. You had Hinata Kanuto versus Jason Nolf, and this is where the out of bounds kind of played a role. There was, first of all, like, I don't know why wrestlers are coming into grappling when they have no intention of grappling. And this is what it seemed to me. Jason Nolf just tried to wrestle from the outside, and Renato was doing his best to engage with him. Like, he would pull guard sometimes. He would let a takedown happen to go into a guillotine or to some submission attempt. But Nolf was just staying outside, and he was getting docked penalty points. At one point, Renato was able to score a triangle. Nolf lifted him up and then walked immediately to out of bounds. The referee blocked him, so then he walked the other way and then ran out of bounds. Like, it should be a DQ if it's that obvious, but they gave him a -4 there. So then Renato was up -5. And in the regulation, Nolf was able to score a couple takedowns, but it wasn't enough to overcome the point gap. But it's just weird to me. Like, I came into grappling somebody that started from Jikondo, and then I went into wrestling and I became a quote-unquote wrestler. But once I started, doing MMA and grappling, I learned the techniques right away. So when I would go into the grappling competitions, I was knee cut passing, straight ankle locking, paintbrushes, kimuras. I was looking for submissions and I was looking to pass guard. I didn't expect to win by takedowns. I was winning by guard passes most of the time. So it's just strange that you still have guys in this day, like, if this was happening like in the year 2000 era, I kind of get it. Like, okay, like, everything's still new. You're going to try to exploit takedown points. But in this rule set where the first 8 minutes don't count, it's like, what are you doing? Right? Like, get with the times. You got to learn how to play the game. The elite level wrestling is only going to take you so far in grappling because you're not going to be able to score. And you're going to be stalling most of the time. And this rule set heavily penalizes stalling, which I'm not opposed to. And it looked like it was done fairly this time around, so it seemed to work. There was another instance where it also worked against the wrestler here, which it was Michael Pixley with Lira. And I had picked this one with Lira, and everybody was saying, oh, you can't bet against Pixley. But I was right, because Pixley is better than Nolf in that regard, but he's still very gun-shy. Like, he was just trying to score takedowns and get front headlocks on the outside. He didn't really try to engage, didn't really work hard to pass guard. And Lira was able to be a lot more aggressive, got a good bite in a leg lock, and then they rolled out of bounds off the heel hook. And got -3 for that. And I figured he was going to get a stalling point just because the way he plays. He got the worst stalling point penalty possible and was never able to make up the deficit when they went into the overtime and lost by those stalling points. And that's how I saw it going down, because if he's not able to score his takedown or his submission, he's going to lose by stalling. So I feel like you got to be a little more proactive there. He obviously has some very good front chokes and from the front headlock that could ruin anybody's day. And his wrestling is obviously good, but he has to be able to work now into being a very good ground player so he can combine all the assets, because he has a very limited path to victory, is like front headlocks and takedowns. And if that's all you got, he can surprise the first few people like he did, but now everybody knows the game. So if I pull guard, I've taken away all of your weapons. So it's another guy with a lot of promise, but he's got to round out the game. And there was another match with Raquel Canuto with, I think it's Michelle Oliveira. I could have the name wrong if I'm so, I apologize. Canuto shined really well there. She was able to get into a mounted guillotine early, but she didn't finish it. She was staying too low, in my opinion. I'm not sure if there was something blocking her, but she never extended her back so that she can get the good deep bridge on that mounted guillotine. She stayed kind of hunched over, so it's going to be hard to finish that one. But her opponent was able to then escape, get on top, but then Raquel was able to do it with a double underhook sweep, get back over. She kept getting good bites, but her opponent kept defending. When they went into the overtime, Raquel was able to score, get the back, and then be able to secure a rear naked choke. So it was another showcase for her. I'm gonna say it again. Like, they need to make a women's title, and Raquel should be the queen there. She's been winning all these matches, looking super good. But there is a contender in the works, which is Maggie Grandati Lira. I guess she married the Lira from earlier in the card, and she's always been a solid black belt, but she had retired for a bit. I guess she came back now. Looked great in her match. She fought a young Brazilian girl who was very tough, maybe a little too tough for her own good, because she was focusing on getting leg locks, and apparently this girl went right into the leg lock battle, which played into Maggie's game, and she was able to counter her leg lock, get into a really deep heel hook, and start really cranking on this inside heel hook from a 50-50. And the Brazilian girl, credit to her poker face, solid. She never grimaced at all, but just ate it until she screamed, right? Which is unfortunate. I don't want to see anyone get hurt, especially like a 19-year-old kid. You gotta be a little smarter there, because I didn't know if she thought she was just gonna poker face her way out of it, But like, that thing was locked in tight, hips were in position, so it was a really nasty leg lock. So that could be a matchup in the making. That would be a good opponent for Raquel, a tough opponent. And there are a few more matches in play, but I want to move on there. I would say I felt that card went all right. Not the greatest Fight Pass Invitational I've seen. I think the main event kind of fumbled. Co-main was okay. There was some exciting moments, but again, I think just because the way that Nolf is playing, it didn't make it as fun as it was as it could have been. And they got to address the out of bounds issues. They got to make a bigger stage, right? Or do something else. It felt like, for whatever reason, that stage was really small that time, and the players kept going out of bounds. Last event, who's number one? I felt this was more of a miss here. Now, who's number one has a lot of mat space, so they don't have as much out of bounds issues, although there are still some. But some of the main matchups really failed up to the hype, and Adele Fornerino was in there, and she killed it as usual, scored a really nasty, I think it was a straight ankle lock. It might have been an Aoki, but I think it was a straight ankle lock. She's showing that she's an unstoppable force in the women's lightweight division. Like, she's just real submission savvy. Helena Craver also was in there. She won her match pretty easily by decision, just dominated from start to finish. Looked really good there. The main event, Kainan Duarte versus Roberto Jimenez, that kind of went the way I thought it would, with Kainan able to control from top position and really just put a lot of pressure. Jimenez did a good job, though. He didn't get his guard passed or anything. He was able to defend, but he wasn't really able to do anything. He just kind of keep Kainan, from scoring anything too good. Towards the end, Kainan did pass, get a mount, and was threatening arm triangles. And he ended up winning the decision, a good decision for him. Good dominant victory, but didn't. I think at the very end, Roberto went for a shot and he dropped in for his guillotine, but time ran out. But a good showcase for Kainan. The co-main was probably the worst one I've ever seen. And it's Pedro Mourinho. No surprises there. It was Isaac Mitchell. And Pedro just pulled off his old shitty wrestling technique again, where he's just pushing the whole time. I don't think he went for one shot attempt, maybe a snatch, but never dropped to his knees. No real clinches. Yet somehow he won all the judges' decisions, or judges' favors, because who's number one? There's 15 minutes, every 3-5 minutes they'll show you a judge's favor, and he won all of them. And I'm watching. I'm like, how are you making this decision? Like, it's the same match happening because, to be fair, Isaac didn't really put that much more effort either. I think Isaac did take a couple shots that he went to his knees, but nothing really consequential. So to me, I would have just called it a draw and DQ'd the both of them and sent them home because it was just wasted 15 minutes of everybody's time. It's so weird when you get these really high-level grapplers that just avoid the ground altogether. And if you're gonna do that, then be a Jason Nolf, right? And have really good wrestling so you can score your takedowns. But if you have, your wrestling is not up to par, what are you doing, right? Like, it's just so frustrating. And it's matches like those that kill grappling, right? Like, to me, that's old school grappling, right? Like, that's what made ADCCs unbearable, were when guys were really playing this point style game and they just avoided going to the ground and they just did this, crappy wrestling for like 15, 20 minutes and you just killed everybody. Like, all your audience just left. So, I mean, I felt like in the modern era, the wrestling improved a lot, and also the players were much more willing to engage. Like, they would pull guard and take chances to try to score and not just, stay on their feet. So like the players took it upon themselves to engage, right? And I think that's a better strategy because if you're doing a tournament, you want to get out of there quickly and you're going to do like long drawn out matches. You might win that match, but you're going to lose, your finals match because you've spent too much energy. But Pedro, didn't seem immune to, or he seems immune to that type of criticism, and he just played this really boring match. Like, I would be embarrassed of a victory like that, in my opinion. And I don't know him personally, so I'm not trying to, insult him or whatnot. I'm just saying from my point of view, you did absolutely nothing. Now, your opponent also did absolutely nothing. But is this a victory I can hang my head proudly on? Like, no. Honestly, it would have been like a coin toss. Like, who's winning? I guess since he's a champ and nothing happened, he stays a champ. I guess there's a logic to that. But man, what a boring. But like, if I'm a promotion, I want to get that guy out of there as quickly as possible, because he's just killing the crowd. Or at least match him up with somebody who's going to pull guard. Maybe like a Levy Jones or whatnot, right? A Leary Jones, like a heel that would engage on the ground, so that it's not going to force Mourinho to work on his ground game. Because fighting somebody who wants to stand up with him is a nightmare for a promotion. Anyhow, those are the events I watched while I was away. So I think grappling, the UFC era now that we have that is trying to enter grappling, if I compared it to the Who's Number One, I think UFC's event did better. More submissions, there was more back and forth. Even the matches that were kind of stally were never as stally as a Mourinho match. Right? That is absolutely the biggest dog shit match I've ever seen in my life. Especially for a co-main event. Just terrible. But they both have something to learn from each other. Now, on the news of this, there is CGI 2 that Craig Jones has revealed is going to be scheduled for next August back here in Las Vegas. Apparently some format changes he's announcing as well. I'll be curious to see that. Like I said, I'm happy that's happening, right? That means there's more competition, more potential for money to be made. Hopefully they can address my slights on the event, which were viewing angles sucked if you were close to the cage walls or the slant walls, because your viewing angle you couldn't see anything. So maybe address the staging a little better, and the intervals between fights definitely a lot shorter, right? Like 15, 20-minute gaps between matches. If you only have one stage, just back to back, put them all one after the other. I don't want to be at a grappling event for 8 hours, right? I think 3 hours is more than enough time. Otherwise, people are going to be doing what they do with UFCs, which they show up for the main event, they miss the undercard, right? Uh, so make the event shorter. Don't make it run like a marathon. That's one of the critiques of ADCC is that the fact that it's such a big tournament that the first day is long, right? Uh, you don't want to do that. Like your event shouldn't be that long, right? Like there is a limit to people's attention span, right? More is not necessarily better, right? You want just right, right? So for me, a sporting performance, 3 hours is about the limit, right? Anything more than that, and you're already kind of bored, you're somewhat desensitized because you've just been so much fighting that like every fight kind of looks the same, and now it's kind of a job versus something you're going to enjoy. So try to minimize that, especially in this type of format where CGI, at least the first one was, which is one event at a time. You got to run through that fast, right? Don't put so many fights. Like if you can't help the sequencing, don't do two brackets, then just do one bracket. Don't do a lot of super fights, then just make it about the tournament. You want to make the event shorter, in my opinion, to make it enjoyable for a live audience. 3 hours should be the goal. Get it done in 3 hours. That's my opinion, anyways. Uh, I hope you guys enjoyed that, right? My little news review there. I also did a seminar in Wyoming. We went to Outlaws MMA in Casper with my friend Dr. Ricardo Nieves. So that was a good time. Haven't taught a seminar in a while, honestly, because I just don't do them as much as I used to. Found myself quite busy and I just haven't had the time to do it. But it was fun to get back on the mats and teach some of my newer stuff on the Kimura trap system to a newer crowd of people, because this was a new school that was just starting to build up. So it's mostly whites and blue belts. But I was able to see them pick it up pretty fast already, and some good questions in the crowd there as well. So that was a fun time. And yeah, that's all I got. So I'll be traveling a few more times this year. I'm going to be going to Reno next week and then going to Sanibel the week after. So it's been a busy traveling year for me. A lot of moving around. But I've been sticking to my schedule. I hope you guys appreciate that, and enjoy the content I've been putting out. It's pretty much 6 days a week of new content, with Sunday being like the wrap up. So if there's anything you guys want to see covered as far as on the website on davidmma.com, if there's some type of techniques you want to see or some type of discussion or podcast, reviews, breakdowns, anything like that, let me know. I'm always open to feedback. And likewise on the podcast, anything you guys want to see here as well, because I just always shoot from the hip and let myself ramble from here. But again, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you all next week.